In this video, we're going to talk about introducing numbers, specifically the idea of counting. Sometimes you get so used to something and so familiar with it that you can forget that learning that thing is actually a non-trivial matter and wasn't intuitive the first time you were exposed to that. One of those things that I've found that is not intuitive if you've never been exposed to it before is really the entire concept of a number. And that might go against conventional wisdom because many young children are able to count, fairly easily. They're able to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're able to recite number sequences, especially small duration number sequences from memory. They're also able to, because they've memorized that number sequence, they're able to do operations like identify the cardinality of groups. So if a child has memorized the number sequence 1 through 10, they could identify the size of this group if you teach them to perform this operation with their hands. So as they're saying the number sequence, to move these down, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the child, and then if they know that after they perform that operation, the last number that they say is the thing that their teacher is looking for, they will say, well, this is 8. Furthermore, many children, even young children, can identify numerals. Ask a young child to identify what's that. You can memorize symbols, so they'll be able to identify that as a 7, as a 1, as an 8, etc. However, that ability to identify this as the word 8 and the ability to list the number sequence by memory while performing this action with your hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that doesn't mean that the child has an association internally between this symbol 8 and this last word that they've said at the end of the number sequence while they're moving their hand. That association as thinking of both of these as 8 and knowing what an 8 is, as its own abstract mathematical object, that likely has not occurred in young children. So that's something that is important to remember as you're teaching and reinforcing these concepts, that the ability to perform some sort of memorized action doesn't translate directly to an understanding. So the first way to think about counting is sets of different size. And by size, I really mean cardinality, but I would recommend not using that word with young kids. Kids can identify this as being fundamentally different than this. And the way that I wish I would have introduced this concept is in the idea of something that they can really internalize. So being by oneself. So you might come up with, rather than using objects like this that have no kind of personality, I might recommend using objects like this that you can tell a story with. So the caterpillar is lonely. Now the caterpillar has a friend. So the caterpillar and a friend, that's something that is different than the caterpillar all by themselves. So this one might be lonely. This one, these guys are not lonely because they have a friend. So that's something, when introducing numbers, calling a 1 as being lonely. This one is all by themselves. Calling a 2 a pair, or this one and their friend, a pair. Introducing that difference between 1 and 2 in those terms, I think would have been really useful to internalizing this concept of sets of different size. And then, of course, the next extension of that is just, a bigger group. So 1, 2, 3. Now, here's what I mean when I say, here's how I wish that I would have introduced the number sequence when counting. So I'm not against the idea of memorizing the number sequence, because that's super helpful and you're going to need it a lot. But here's how I wish I would have introduced it. I wish I would have introduced it in these terms. Specifically, introduce the number sequence by means of the operation add 1. So here's what I mean. You could do this. You could just say, listen up, we're gonna count. Follow me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you could say, this is 5. I have this, at least in my experience, this will not stick in. The child will memorize the sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll be able to recite the sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like they can memorize a song or memorize a list of words or memorize a list of names. But it won't be internalized as like that, even that 1 is smaller than 2. So instead, I would introduce this as 1. All right, this one's all lonely. Let's bring them a friend. Okay, so now they have a friend. Now you could put these guys on different sides of the line and maybe make a little story about it, like they live in different houses or something like that. So this one and this one, they can see each other. Now this one wants a friend on this side of the line. So along comes this guy. So then you can ask the child, this is is this group different than this group? And the kid can identify, oh yeah, this one has a friend, this one doesn't. Just like they learned before here. All right, now let's move all these guys over on this side. And now make another group with the same number as this group. And the way you can easily help the kid do this is by saying, give each one of these a friend on the other side of the line. So, then they'll get a friend. Zoop, zoop. Okay, so this is the same number as this because they both, like every bug has a friend. So this set is the same size as that set. Now, give these guys, they feel like they want to invite another spider. So then along comes another spider, and now all 3 spiders can play together, and you can have the kid play with these. They can maybe make up a little story or something. Okay, now let's look. This one is different than this group is different than this group, and that's different than this group. And I really would use different types of objects for the different groups, just so it's really obvious that this is a group, and this is a group, this is a group. Like I wouldn't mix and match and put like a, cat, like a grasshopper in there. And then the same idea, you make a group of the same size, and then you add 1. And that idea of counting as making a group of the same size as you had before, zoop, 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 and adding 1, getting the concept of counting as that operation rather than just a memorized sequence of numbers, I think that would have been really useful, because when it comes to teaching other mathematical operations, such as instead of add 1, maybe you teach add 2. Having a mental model where you're used to counting as the operation add 1 to your set of that size, that is really useful and can help a lot later. So yeah, that's the idea of counting. So counting is sets of different size and creating new numbers by add 1 operation. So that's those are the 2 concepts that I think are really important to teach when introducing counting before the number sequence starts getting to be memorized. So every time we talk about numbers or do something with numbers, I think it's helpful to kind of explicitly explain the process rather than just assuming that if the kid is able to come up with the answer, then they will understand. So if you do these two things whenever you're trying to teach counting, then I think that will make it more clear and obvious whether the kid really internalizes the fundamental operations of counting.